At work, I was fine. That was the joke. I could walk into a packed ER at 2 in the morning, somebody yelling for blood, somebody else crashing in room 9, and my hands stayed steady. I knew what to do, what to say, where to stand. People liked that about me. They called it calm. What it really was function. I had built my whole life around it. Outside the hospital, function looked a lot less impressive. 2 years earlier, I had been engaged. It ended quietly, which somehow did more damage than a scene would have. No plates, no betrayal, no dramatic exit. Just one evening at our kitchen table and her telling me, in a voice so even it barely sounded real, that she had not loved me properly for a long time. I remember nodding like she was giving me lab results. Then I moved closer to the hospital, started picking up extra shifts, and turned the rest of my life into something I could walk through half asleep. The building was mostly residents, nurses, travel staff, and other people who left home at hours normal people considered a mistake. That was why I picked it. Nobody asked questions if you came in wearing scrubs at dawn and looked half dead. A week after I moved in, the woman in the next unit moved into mine without meaning to. Not literally, just in the way people start taking up space in your head. The first time I saw her, she was getting out of the elevator while I was getting in. Navy scrubs, compression socks, hair tied up badly like she'd redone it in a staff bathroom, lunch bag in one hand, badge still clipped at her waist. ICU I saw before the doors shut. She looked the way some people do after 12 hours of keeping other people alive. Not dramatic, just used up in a controlled way. After that, I noticed her everywhere. Coming home when I was leaving when I was coming back. Standing in the lobby with stale coffee and that 1,000-yard stare medical people get when their body has made it home but the rest of them is still under fluorescent lights. We passed each other in silence enough times that it started to feel familiar. Not friendly. Familiar. She wasn't bright or chatty. Thank God. I would have avoided her harder if she had been. She had that same contained way of moving I'd seen in trauma nurses, senior residents, people who were one bad week away from dropping but wouldn't let themselves do it in public. She kept everything tucked in. Even tired, she looked composed. That was exactly the problem. I recognized too much too fast, so I kept it to nods. Elevator politeness. Once, when she was unlocking her door with both hands full of groceries, I held the stairwell door open for her, and she gave me a tired thanks without looking up. Another time she glanced at the badge clipped to my backpack and said, "R." I said, "Yeah." She nodded once like that explained enough, which it did. I learned her patterns anyway. 3-night stretches. Weekend blocks. Random midweek returns that meant overtime or a bad staffing mess. She learned mine too. Once, getting into the elevator at 6 in the morning, she looked at my blood-spotted shoe covers and said, "Rough one." I said, "Yeah." She pressed the lobby button and said nothing else. That was the first moment I knew she handled people correctly. Anybody outside the job would have asked what happened. Anybody trying too hard would have offered sympathy I didn't want. She just stood there beside me in the humming silence like she understood that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for another medic is not make them narrate their own worst hour. Still, I kept my distance. Then came the PEDS case. A little girl. Bad enough that I could still see the mother's face after. We did everything right. That was the part that stayed with me. We moved fast, clean, textbook. It still wasn't enough. By the time I got home, the sun was coming up and my scrubs smelled like antiseptic and sweat and the stale metallic air of a room that goes quiet too suddenly. I didn't go into my apartment. I made it to the stairwell and sat down halfway between floors like my legs had made the decision before I did. I wasn't crying. I wasn't falling apart. I just couldn't make myself move for a minute. A few seconds later, the stairwell door opened. She stepped in, saw me and stopped. Her hair was loose now, eyes ringed with exhaustion, one hand still around the strap of her bag. For a second I thought she might apologize and leave. Instead she looked at me the way you look at somebody whose pressure is dropping, quick, accurate, no panic. Then she crossed the landing, sat down one step below me, and put a paper cup beside my hand. Fresh coffee. Still hot. She didn't ask what happened. Didn't say it would be okay. just sat there with me in the dim stairwell light while the building woke up around us, quiet and steady and close enough to count as company. That was the first crack, and I felt it the second it opened. After that stairwell morning, we didn't suddenly become those neighbors who leaned in each other's doorways every night and talked for hours. It was slower than that, better than that, honestly. Nothing forced, nothing shiny. Just a small change in the way we moved around each other, like some silent rule had been dropped. 2 nights later, I came home to a paper bag hanging from my doorknob. Inside was a turkey sandwich, a bruised apple, and one of those stupid expensive bottled coffees from the hospital cafe. No note, but it didn't need one. I looked at her door for a second, then at the bag again, and laughed once under my breath because it was exactly the sort of thing a tired ICU nurse would do instead of saying something soft. The next week, I returned the favor after a brutal weekend stretch. Thai takeout in a plastic sack, still warm. Left outside her apartment around 8 in the morning when I saw her badge clipped to her bag through the crack of the door and knew she'd just gotten in. That became our version of talking before we actually talked. Then one morning after shift, I found her in the lobby fighting with the coffee machine like it had personally insulted her. "It steals my money every time," she muttered. "It does that because it can sense weakness." She looked over at me, tired enough to smile for real. "That your official ER opinion?" "Absolutely. Machines smell fear." She snorted, and that was the first time I heard her laugh. We ended up walking to the 24-hour place half a block over because neither of us trusted the machine and both of us looked too wrecked to pretend otherwise. The city was just waking up. Delivery trucks, dog walkers, people in gym clothes with fresh faces I found offensive on principle. We sat by the window in our scrubs with bad coffee and eggs neither of us really wanted. And it was easier than I expected. Her name was Audrey. Once I had that, everything else started coming a little easier too. We talked the way hospital people talk when they don't need to explain the job. Ratios, administrators, the weird guilt of eating when somebody upstairs was having the worst day of their life. She told me ICU had been short 3 nurses the night before and management had sent an email about workflow optimization, which made me say, nothing says support like a person with a laptop describing suffering as workflow. She smiled into her coffee. Exactly. That was the thing with her. Outside our building, she was probably quiet to most people. With me, once she stopped holding every word behind her teeth, she was dry and sharp and funny in a way that landed low and clean. The kind of humor people grow when they spend too much time around alarms and grief and still need to stay human somehow. We started finding each other without making a big deal out of it. 10 minutes on the stairs after shift. Eating takeout on the floor outside my door because neither of us had the energy to host like actual adults. Running into each other in the hallway and ending up talking for 40 minutes about one awful family meeting or one ridiculous policy change. There was relief in it, and that relief got dangerous fast. One night near midnight, I came back from a shift that felt twice as long as it was and found her sitting on the back fire escape with her knees up, still in scrubs, staring out at the alley. I pushed the door open. "You hiding?" "Taking in the view," she said. "Dumpster really looks good in this light." I sat beside her. Strong architectural lines. For a minute we just listened to the building hum around us. Then she said, "I used to think dating someone in medicine meant they'd understand. That it would make things easier." I looked at her, but she kept her eyes out ahead. "He was a hospitalist at my old place," she said. "We were together 3 years, engaged for 6 months. I stayed quiet. He didn't just make me look stupid personally. I could have survived that." Her jaw tightened. There was a staffing complaint. Ratios were unsafe, everybody knew it, and I documented things I was supposed to document. He had access to some of it, knew exactly what had happened, and when admin started asking questions, he went careful and quiet and let it land on me. He protected himself. I got treated like I was difficult, like I was exaggerating. I had to fight to keep my footing over something that shouldn't have touched me in the first place. "That's dirty," I said. "Yeah." She finally looked at me. It changes how you see people after that, especially people who speak the same language. I knew what she meant. In our world, trust wasn't just personal. It could cost you rent, references, your name, your place in the unit. She asked about me once or twice before, and I'd always kept it thin. That night I didn't. We were together 5 years, I said. Mine ended at the kitchen table. She told me she hadn't loved me the right way for a long time. Audrey's face changed, just a little. Not pity. Recognition. I think that was worse, I said. No explosion. Nothing to be angry at. Just finding out I'd been standing inside something dead and calling it a future. She didn't rush to fill the silence after that. She just sat there with me while the cold metal stairs pressed through my scrubs. By then, the attraction between us was obvious enough that pretending otherwise had started to feel stupid. But what hit harder was something else. When I was with her, my body stopped bracing for a little while. My mind got quieter. She felt the same, I think. Not easy. Not safe in some childish way. More like the first full breath after being underwater longer than you realized. It started with a change so small I could have missed it if I didn't already know her patterns. Audrey still came and went at the same hours. Still answered when I spoke to her. Still stood next to me in the elevator with that same tired posture. Badge clipped to her scrub pocket. Hair pulled back badly after a long shift. But something in her had tightened. Not cold. Not angry. Just drawn in, like she was spending energy holding every part of herself in place. The first time I saw him, I understood why. I was coming out of the ED after a meeting that should have been an email, cutting through the connector hall toward the garage, when I saw Audrey near the bank of elevators with a man in a gray suit and hospital badge. He wasn't old. Mid-30s, maybe. Put together in that polished hospital system way, like he spent more time in conference rooms than at bedsides now. He was standing too close. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for me to notice. Audrey's face had gone still. Not emotional. Worse, professional. The man was talking quietly, and she was listening with that blank, contained look people get when they're trying not to react in public. Then she said something short, stepped around him, and kept walking without seeing me at all. That night I found out from a charge nurse that a regional quality review team had started rotating through units across the system. Staffing incidents, documentation practices, old complaints getting reopened because somebody higher up wanted a clean report before budget season. His name was Adrian Robinson. Nursing operations now. Same hospital group. Transfer from another campus. I didn't need anyone to explain further. After that, Audrey became harder to reach. Not vanished. Just farther away by inches. She stopped lingering in the hallway. Started saying she was tired before conversations had room to turn into anything real. Twice I came home and saw the line of light under her door and knew she was there, awake and choosing silence. Once I knocked with coffee after a brutal overnight, and she opened the door only halfway, gave me a small smile that didn't touch her eyes and said, "I'm okay, just need sleep." People always say that when sleep is the least of it. I wanted to push, ask directly, ask how bad it was, what he wanted, whether he was trying to drag her into something again. But I knew enough not to do that. Pressure is pressure, even when it comes dressed as concern. So I did the harder thing. I stayed where she could find me. I left food at her door when I knew her shift had been ugly. I texted once, only once. "You don't owe me explanations. I'm here." She didn't answer for 3 hours, then sent back, "I know." That one line nearly wrecked me. A week later, we almost lost whatever this was. I got home near dawn and found her in the hallway unlocking her door. She looked terrible. Not dramatic, just drained down to the frame. I said, "You want coffee?" She kept her eyes on the lock. "Not tonight." Okay. I should have let it go there. Instead I said, "He's back in your orbit, isn't he?" Her shoulders went stiff. "That's not your business," she said, too fast. I took the hit because I'd earned it. "All right." She got the door open, then turned back with one hand still on the knob. I cannot do this thing where someone decides they're helping me and starts managing me. "I'm not managing you." "No." Her voice stayed low, but I could hear the strain under it now. "Because it feels a lot like being watched for signs I'm failing." That landed because it was the exact wrong thing, and exactly the thing she must have feared. I said, I'm sorry. She looked at me for a second like she wanted to say more, then shook her head once and went inside. For 2 days, nothing. The hallway felt wrong. The building felt wrong. I worked, slept badly, worked again. I told myself to leave it alone. That if I cared about her at all, I needed to let her come back on her own or not at all. On the third night, a knock came at my door just after 11. I opened it, and there she was in a sweatshirt and scrub pants, hair loose, face bare, eyes red with exhaustion but finally honest. "Can I come in?" she asked. I moved aside. She didn't sit at first. Just stood in my kitchen with both hands wrapped around the tea I made her and stared at the counter like she was trying to line the words up before they got away. Then she said, "He didn't just leave me hanging back then." I stayed quiet. There was an incident with staffing. I documented that we were unsafe. A patient turned badly, family complained, admin started looking around, and Adrian had been using some of what I told him in private to shape his own reports upward. She swallowed. When it got ugly, he said he didn't remember certain conversations. Said my notes were emotional. Made me look unstable and overinvested because we were together and he knew exactly where to press. I felt my jaw lock. "I almost lost my position," she said. "Not because I did anything wrong. Because I trusted the wrong person inside the same system that judged me after. And now, he wants me to sign off that the old review process was fair. That nothing inappropriate affected staffing decisions. He says it's just cleanup for the new audit." She laughed once, with no humor in it. "Cleanup. He walked back into my life because he needs my name on paper." That was the full shape of it. Not romance. Not unfinished feelings. Excess. Audrey finally looked at me then, and for the first time since this started, she looked scared enough to stop hiding it. "I've been pulling away," she said quietly, "because the second he came back, I started feeling stupid all over again, and because wanting you while this was happening made me feel reckless." I stepped closer, but not too close. "You are not stupid," I said. Her mouth tightened. "I know that in theory. I'm not asking for theory." She let out one shaky breath and set the mug down before her hands gave her away. "I didn't know how to have you near this without feeling like I was handing somebody a weapon," she said. That one stayed between us, heavy and true, and I understood exactly what she meant. She stayed in my kitchen a long time that night, not talking the whole time. We were both too tired for that. But something had shifted the second she said it out loud. The second she stopped acting like this was just stress, just bad timing, just her being distant for no reason. Once the truth was in the room, it stopped controlling every corner of it. "What's he actually asking for?" I said. Audrey rubbed her forehead. "There's a review packet. He wants statements from staff connected to that period, and he keeps framing it like it's routine. Like I'm being dramatic for seeing it any other way." "Are you required to sign anything?" "No." "Then don't." She gave me a tired look. "You make things sound very simple." "Not simple," I said. "Clean." That got a real reaction out of her. Small but real. She leaned back against the counter and looked at me for a second like she was measuring whether to trust the quiet in the room. "He still does it," she said. "That same thing. He talks like he's the reasonable one, like everybody else is just overreacting around him. Ever dealt with someone who acts reasonable while making you feel like you're losing your mind? Tell me your story in the comments." And for a minute I start hearing it the way I used to. "Yeah," I said. "That's how that kind of person keeps getting invited back in." She nodded once. I didn't tell her what to send or who to call. Didn't offer to storm into some office and handle it for her. She didn't need a rescuer. She needed one place where reality stayed reality. So I said, "Whatever you decide it while you're not standing in front of him." The next few days were ugly, but not in a dramatic way. More like controlled damage. The kind medical people are weirdly good at. She worked. I worked. We crossed paths in the hallway, and this time she didn't retreat. One morning she knocked on my door after shift and drank half a cup of coffee on my couch without saying much. Another night I found her sitting on the back stairs again, and she moved over without looking at me so I could sit beside her. That was us for a little while. No speeches. just not hiding. Then came the meeting. She told me about it afterward, not before. I think she needed to walk into it as herself, not as someone being watched. I was home first that evening, still in scrubs, heating leftovers I barely wanted when I heard her key in the lock next door. A minute later there was a knock. I opened the door and saw it immediately. Not relief exactly. More solid than that. "It's done," she said. I stepped aside and let her in. She stood in the middle of my apartment, dropped her bag by the chair, and let out a long breath. He cornered me after the review session. Same tone, same calm voice. Said signing would help close out old procedural confusion. Said it would be good for everybody to move on. I waited. I told him no. Her mouth twitched, almost like she still didn't fully believe she'd done it. Then I told him I remembered exactly what happened, and if anyone needed clarification on that period, I'd be happy to give a formal statement through the right channel, not through him. I smiled before I meant to. How'd he like that? He didn't. She looked at me then, and there was something lighter in her face than I'd seen in weeks, which helped. I laughed once. That tracks. She moved closer, slow, like there was still a little disbelief in her own body. "I kept waiting to feel wrecked after," she said. "Or shaky. Or guilty. But mostly I just felt tired. And then hungry, which was kind of insulting after all that buildup." "That's the most normal response I've ever heard." She smiled. A real one this time. The room went quiet after that, but not empty. The kind of quiet that means the important part is still coming. I looked at her and knew I was done pretending there was any version of this where she didn't matter. "I need to tell you something," I said. Audrey's expression changed. Softer now, more careful. "I kept my distance from the first week," I said. "Not because I wasn't interested, because I was too fast." I let out a breath. That first morning in the elevator, I looked at you and knew you were going to get through all the places I'd locked down. And I did not want that to be true. Her eyes stayed on mine. "I had already built a whole future once," I said. "After that ended, work became the only thing in my life that made sense. It was measurable, contained. I knew how to do it. Then you showed up next door looking like you understood every ugly part of that without asking me to explain it. And I knew if I let you close, you wouldn't stay on the surface." For a second, she didn't say anything. Then she stepped in, close enough that I could see how tired she still was, and how steady. "I was afraid of you for almost the exact same reason," she said. "Not you specifically, what you are. This whole world." She glanced down, then back up. "You belong to the same life that already cost me a lot once. And every time I started wanting you, I hated how vulnerable that made me feel." I nodded. There was nothing to argue with there. "But you never used any of it against me," she said quietly. "Not my work, not my silence, not my bad days. You just stayed." That landed harder than anything else. When I kissed her, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't some big movie release after pages of tension. It felt more like the end of a long-held breath. Her hand came up to my jaw, warm and a little unsteady, and I understood all at once that the thing between us had stopped being a possibility somewhere along the way. It was already real. We were just finally saying it with our bodies too. Later, we took our coffee out to the back stairs before sunrise, because apparently neither of us knew how to choose romance over habit completely. The alley looked the same. The dumpster still looked terrible. The city was starting up again. Audrey sat beside me, shoulder against mine. "We should make one rule," she said. "Only one." She thought about it. "No disappearing when work gets bad." I looked at her over the rim of my cup. "That's a good rule." "And no pretending we're fine when we're not." "That might be harder." "Probably." I nodded. "Still." She leaned into me a little more. "Still." It wasn't dreamy.